All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Ed Talks. I'm Kristen Rao, Executive Director of EatDenver, and it is so great to see you all here pretty early for the industry, so we super appreciate it. The mission of EatDenver is to support and strengthen the Denver area's independent restaurant community. At its core, we're a community focused on camaraderie and collaboration, guided by a belief that a rising tide lifts all boats. I look around the room at our sea of owners, operators, managers, back of house, front of house, bartenders, hospitality students, and friends of the industry, and it's a place where our community can come together, can catch up with old friends and network with new faces, can commiserate and talk hopefully about future ventures, and this is EatDenver. What started with a group of ragtag restaurateurs is a growing room of inspiration and empowerment, of pooling resources and best practices, and supporting the development of a greater group, our current community and the next generation. So thank you all, not only for coming today to hear some great speeches and to get inspired about your roles in the industry, but also for showing up for each other through all these years, for being the flavor of our community, and for being the heartbeat of our city. Thanks. So before we continue today's program, I want to do a quick shout out. I want to thank our volunteer board of directors and a couple members of our volunteer committees. The inspiring group of owners and operators, of consultants, and of industry professionals not only work tirelessly within our industry, but also to directly support EatDenver's membership through their work on our committees, through our events, and through our programs. A special shout out to our president, Dana Query, who couldn't be here today, but especially for her dedication over the last couple months with ongoing industry legislation and government affairs work. And also to Sarah Abel, a partner at Baltz & Company and our program chair. Thank you for all your assistance in making this morning possible. Both of these women are beautiful and talented, and I promise I won't call as much when this is all over. So thank you, a huge round of applause to everyone on our board and everyone who assists with EatDenver. Additionally, this morning wouldn't be possible without our great sponsors and their support of our professional development. And so just calling some out, the MSU School of Hospitality for donating the space and for sending hospitality students to get inspired and kind of rub shoulders with some of you all. Shamrock Foods, Tito's Handmade Vodka, Ecolab, Society Insurance, Nice Healthcare, New Belgium Brewing, and InBank. Thank you for your support this morning. Additionally, and what some of you might find more importantly, our breakfast spread. So thank you so much to Rosenberg's, to Novo Coffee, The Real Deal and Tito's for the Bloody Bar, to Patter Bar. If you're gluten-free, check out those bars in the back, and then to New Belgium Brewing again. And kind of a last thank you to our community partners, so EP Distribution for all the compostable serviceware, and to Scraps, you'll see their compost stations around, and they're just helping make our events as waste-free as possible this year, so thank you to them as well. So just before we move forward, we just wanted to take a moment to remember those members of our community, food, beverage, hospitality, who are no longer with us. So if you could please join us in a moment of remembrance and a celebration of the legacy for those friends and colleagues who have passed. Thank you so much. So we're in for a great morning. And I'm so excited to introduce our speakers. Here's that lineup again, kind of how we're gonna flow. The first three speakers are gonna speak. We're gonna do a 10-minute break. We ask that you hold until this break to kind of get more refreshments, to use the restroom, and then we'll do our final three speakers. So, as Cassie comes onto stage, I just want us to all take a moment to settle in and take a big collective breath and get ready for this morning. Thanks all.
All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Cassie Lamb. I am the brand new Programs and Events Director for EatDenver. So this is my first big event. Very excited to be here. And I am more excited to introduce Brad Allen Reubendale. He is the CEO of So All May Eat, Same Cafe, a food justice nonprofit that serves everyone healthy and delicious food regardless of ability to pay. Brad has many years of experience working to deliver quality programs to under-resourced people. His history includes Urban Peak, a nonprofit which addresses youth homelessness, CASA, court-appointed special advocates, a program to advocate for children in foster care, testifying at the Colorado Capitol on behalf of foster children and LGBTQ youth, and being a youth pastor. He also has a few degrees, but the most important education he ever receives is when he shuts up and listens to other people's experiences. Please join me in welcoming Brad for his speech, Lead from Your Fucked Up Soul.
I'm Brad Reubendale. I'm the CEO of So All May Eat, Same Cafe, and it's been around for 17 years. And the Berkeys, Brad and Libby Berkey, are actually in the audience over here, the founders of Same Cafe. And so they had this beautiful idea 17 years ago and started this nonprofit restaurant that everyone kind of thought was crazy and that maybe it would last for 6 months. We've been going for 17 years and we've actually inspired about 6 other restaurants around the country to try a pay-what-you-can model. And some of them have been successful, some have not. But the cool part is that I took over about 6 years ago and was able to grow the organization. And as of 4 months ago, we have our second location in Toledo, Ohio, of all places. We'll talk about libraries if you want to, but we're in the library system there, and that's how I want to grow us. But anyway, it's a beautiful space, and thank you. Does this work? Testing. There we go. I can't be tied to one spot. I have to move too much. So if you haven't heard of Same, how many have been to Same Cafe? Raise your hand. Awesome, amazing. So if Same Cafe is a place where you can come in and order off of a menu that changes every single day based on what's in season and in stock. And then it also, you can participate how you want. It's a participation-based restaurant where people can volunteer in exchange for a meal, they can pay what they can, or donate produce in exchange for a meal. Any luck on the slides? Is it, oh, there it is. Oh, okay. There we go. So, here we go. I love what I'm doing, but that's not why I'm here to talk to you. The title of my talk is Lead from Your Fucked Up Soul, if you didn't notice that already. And so, all of what I just said is part of how I start every talk that I do. And none of that is false, but I want to give you a little bit of an insight into what goes on inside this chaotic mind and kind of how that has led me to where I am now. So I am going to just give a quick trigger warning. We're going to talk about childhood sexual trauma and suicidality this morning. And I know that's early on a Wednesday morning to talk about these things, but here we go. So if you need to leave or get your therapist on speed dial, get it going. So when I was 25 years old, my whole world fell apart. I actually was in grad school and was really thriving, and my world fell apart because I was dating this woman. Yes, I dated a woman. I used to wear ill-fitting clothes and have a drawl, so I sort of passed as straight, which was fun. But I was dating this woman who was in school to be a therapist, and she casually mentioned one time, she was in her trauma class, and kind of mentioned some of the adult effects of children who've experienced trauma. And I fit perfectly, and it kind of, my body started reacting, and it was the craziest thing. So I went and found the nearest bathroom on campus, curled up in a ball for about 45 minutes, and sobbed. And my body was having all of these intense reactions, and I didn't fully understand. But thankfully, I had a therapist who I could call, and it started a 3-year process of having PTSD, where I went back and revisited all of my childhood traumas, learned how to be kind to myself and understand where those traumas come from, and learn how to rescue the little children inside of me who had been abused to be able to become an integrated person as much as I am. I don't know, not very, but but it's functional. So I was not always this aged out gay with a massive forehead. I used to be this tiny little gay with a massive forehead. And I didn't know that I was gay at first, and I'll get into that. So it took me about 20 years to figure that out. So when I was 6 months old, I used to love playing in the bathtub, and I would like splash and have a lot of fun. And one time I was in there, and I splashed and hit a hot light bulb, and it exploded and burned me over 13 parts of my body. And I learned fear at that moment. It triggered my body and brain into understanding the world is unsafe and I need to be hypervigilant at all times because something is going to come out of the woodwork. I didn't have the language for that at the time, obviously, but that was what happened. When I was 3 years old, an older boy started molesting me. And when this happened, the crazy thing about being this age and having a friend, an older friend, molest you, is that there's a lot of grooming that happens. So I didn't understand that it was bad. He was just my friend who wanted to do things that made me really deeply uncomfortable, and I didn't know how to process that. And when I tried to speak about it and stop it, he said, shh, it's our secret, don't say anything. And then when I tried to tell my family and my friends and other people about it, I didn't have the language to communicate it, and so no one saved me from that. And so what I learned was silence in that moment. Turn off everything, stop reacting, don't trust your body. When I was 6 years old, so I was raised in a cult, so a little side note. We're not gonna talk about the cult. Give me a beer and we'll do that. But I used to sleep with my Bible. It was my comfort. I was a fucked up little kid, and so I would sleep with my Bible, and it was like my comfort. And I found out that there were kids in other countries that didn't have Bibles, and it broke my heart. So I started this little club where I would figure out where to get Bibles in their language, where to find their addresses, and then I went and asked every adult I knew for $1 because $1 could get me to send a Bible, and I started this little club, and I was like the president and dictator of the club, and I was having a blast with it. And one day I walked into the little meeting that we had, and all of my friends had been talking about me, and they said, we're kicking you out of the club, we don't want you to be president anymore. I didn't know why, but I shut off, and what I learned was to hide all of my strengths in those moments, because it looked like that they could see something that I couldn't see, and I didn't know what it was, so I just kind of shut down and hid. When I was 8 years old, I had a traumatic sexual violation where 3 older boys molested me. And that one was one that I didn't want and was no part of, like it was a violent one. And I tried to fight back, but I was too little because they were all older than me. And so I will never forget the rage that came up in me in that moment. And it was rage at them, but it was also rage at myself for being so weak to let this happen. And so that rage turned in on me, and I lived with all of this intense emotionality for a long time. See, I told you, ill-fitting clothes. So then whenever I was about 17 years old, we got kicked out of the cult. And what I did is I took all of that experience from my childhood, I put it in a box, and I hid it away and pretended it never happened. And so I jumped into, I knew I was fucked up inside, and so I didn't know what to do with that, and I just assumed it was because I was gay. So I started 13 years of conversion therapy to try to fix my own sexuality, analyze every single thing about me to be able to fix it and move forward. That led me to a moment where I decided to kill myself. And for a lot of queer religious kids, that's where you end up because there's no way out except for a death. And my life died, but I stayed alive, thankfully. And I was gonna make it look like an accident because I didn't want anyone else to know that I was gonna do that because I didn't want them to have permission to do it. It was me that was the only one that was gonna get to do it. So right before I was gonna do this, I had the darkness in my brain opened up just a little bit, and this phrase, Brad, you are not toxic, dropped into my soul, took root, and like spread throughout every part of me. And for whatever reason, I knew I was gonna stay alive, but I was gonna be gay and figure that side of it out. It was gonna be messy as hell, and it has been. But I knew that I was gonna stay alive. And so that was one of those beautiful moments when I got to figure out what is all of this chaos inside, and how does that relate to where I'm at now? And that's what I wanna talk to you about. So this is what's crazy, is that each one of these moments from my childhood that I learned has become the strength that leads my leadership now, that guides my leadership now. And so the fear that I had was, like, here's the thing, nothing can sneak up on me because I'm always looking out for something bad going on. It's hypervigilance. And so that's become the radar where I'm scanning the horizon constantly, and I'm usually making a mitigation plan for every possible eventuality that could go wrong. And so it's become my radar, and now as a leader, very, very few things could surprise me at this point because I've probably thought about it and I've probably made a plan for it. It's one of my superpowers. The silence. It was so amazing to work through all of the deep trauma of that being silenced because I found my voice and I found out where my body starts and stops and where other people's does. And I learned about consent, which is amazing. And I learned about like how to be able to speak up when I feel uncomfortable, even if I don't know why I feel uncomfortable. How do I speak up and be able to do that? And it's become boundaries. And for me, boundaries are really important, especially when you're a people-helping profession, because everyone's going to ask for everything, and you have to figure out where you start and stop and where other people start and stop. And so it's been this beautiful thing where I probably have too good of boundaries now. My husband will be like, "You're a dick." And I'm like, "That sounds like a you problem. Let me know when you sort that out." I'm just being me. You do this. And so it's become really good boundaries, mostly, I think, to be able to guide the organization that I'm in. And this one was an interesting one. That hiding, what's crazy is I was a little 6-year-old CEO, right? Like I was like, had a mission, I gathered people to do that mission, I fundraised towards that, and then I operationalized it. That's what I do every single day right now, but it got shut down because someone else told me that I shouldn't be doing that. And so now I lead from a place of vulnerability because here I am, I'm doing the things that I was doing at 6 years old, and fuck all the way off, I'm gonna do it because I can do that from a place of vulnerability. And now the reality is that being in a leadership position will bring up every trauma you've ever had. And so you have to be exposed because whatever happens in your organization is your fault if it's bad. And if it's good, it's usually your team. And that's just the way it is. And so, exactly, my team is all right here, by the way, hi. And so the beautiful thing is now I can lead from a place of vulnerability. This one's my favorite one, though. That rage that I had when I was 8 years old has become the power that guides me throughout my life. It's the injustice of not being able to fight back and then realizing that everyone has experienced a version of that powerlessness when people have experienced racial injustice and racism, when people have experienced transphobia and homophobia and misogyny and all of that stuff. It's a system that's keeping someone in place. And now that is my power to like fight that on a daily basis, starting with food justice and expanding throughout the rest of the world, hopefully. And I get to create spaces where other people can thrive, not just cisgendered white men that are mediocre like me. So the title of my talk is Lead from Your Fucked Up Soul. And here's what I want to say is every single person in here has had something that's tried to silence you, kill you, shut you down, stop you, make you less effective. But you're still here. And you're sitting right here in these chairs, which means that you're stronger than whatever that thing is. And that is your superpower. Lean into it. When you feel fucked up, lean into it and see what it has to teach you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chad Michael George. I am the soon-to-be treasurer of EatDenver, former president, former vice president. I keep getting demoted, but they keep me around, so must be doing something okay. Super honored to be up here today to present our next speaker, who I've watched from afar as a speaker at one of my favorite annual industry events called Tales of the Cocktail, which takes place in New Orleans in the most pleasant time to be in New Orleans, end of July. So next up we have Laura Louise Green. She's the founder of Healthy Pour. Healthy Pour is an organizational consultancy focused on improving the mental health and well-being of individuals composing the hospitality, food, and drinks sector. Laura, as an organizational consultant and a licensed psychotherapist and former hospitality and drinks professional, she's worked in the hospitality industry more years of her life than she hasn't, which combined with her clinical and academic background has given her a unique and intimate perspective when addressing complex issues in the hospitality industry. Laura came all the way from Chicago to be with us this morning, so let's give her a big round of applause. She's going to talk to us about the case for an emotional industry.
That was so great. I'm going to use this one.
Okay, I'll put this one
Cool. Thanks. Hi. It's so nice to hear people say such nice things. Thank you, Chad. My name is Laura Louise Green. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm from Chicago. So if I'm gasping, it's because I can't breathe here. Please forgive me. But, here's my clicker. There it is. That's me. So my background is in hospitality, but I'm also a therapist. And there was a period of time in my life that I was about to leave the industry because I was like, this is unsafe. This is terrible. I'm not going to make it till I'm 40. I am drinking like a wild woman. I was like a wild animal spinning through Chicago. I'm sure you can envision that or maybe even relate. But I wanted to become a therapist. And then by the time I was finishing my degree, I was like, wait, I want to help the industry because now I have all the skills to repair what I was running from. One of those things I think that causes a lot of our trouble is our emotions. And I'm going to be real with you. Our emotions can really screw things up. Our emotions can really mess up our decision-making processes. They can really mess up how we engage with each other, with our relationships. I was talking to a client and he was like, I want to approach this logically. I'm going to take all emotion out of it and just review the data with you. And I'm like, brah, you cannot remove your emotions. You cannot. You can't, even when you stuff them down. Also, I'm really glad to follow Brad because he teed me up. Boop. So, love it. But you can stifle your emotions down and stuff them, but that doesn't make them go away. It's like a 2-year-old. If you ignore a 2-year-old, what happens? They just get louder and louder and more annoying and annoying. So when I say emotions can really screw things up, this is only when we don't understand them. Because if we aren't aware of how our emotions are affecting us in our day-to-day, in our decision-making processes, and how we're regarding each other and how we're thinking about ourselves, then it becomes like a wild horse. I had a professor say that our emotions are like a wild horse, that either we can try and cage them and they're going to destroy everything, or we can learn how to ride them and we can work with them and they can enrich our lives and we can go places that we never thought. So a little bit about emotions. They're guides. Exactly what Brad was saying. They're guides to help us understand our needs when we're safe and when we're in danger. And again, they're happening all the time, whether we want them around or not. So when you are experiencing a challenging emotion, that is an indication that there is a need somewhere that is not being met. When we are experiencing pleasant emotions, it's an indication that our needs are being met. So we have this beautiful built-in spidey sense to guide us through our lives. And when we have high energy in our life, so when we're experiencing stress or conflict, we'll feel energy and adrenaline and stuff. That's when let's think of the mood meter. High energy needs are not being met. That's when we experience rage. When we have low energy and our needs are not being met, that's when we experience depression. But when we have low energy and our needs are being met, that's when we are content, happy. When we have high energy and our needs are being met, that's when we're excited. So we can use our emotions to really tell us, are my needs where is my need not being met right now? So they're guides, it's a tool, and it's an invaluable tool that if we just stuff them down and leave it, we're leaving a lot of potential on the table. We can only be really logical in our decision-making processes and how we engage with each other if we have a sense of how our emotional life is influencing us. We cannot leave our emotions at the door. We cannot. If that's something that you continue to hear in your circles, I would start to shut that down because there's a lot behind that isn't really helpful, not just for how we work in restaurants, but our well-being overall. So our emotions are the map, but they are not the vehicle. And I want you to think about the difference of when we have emotional dysregulation or when we are not contained in our emotions, we might have big emotional outbursts. So think about that 2-year-old that's exploding or that wild horse that's trying to break out of its cage. So these big emotional outbursts then become the vehicle of our expression as opposed to what we're feeling and then communicating. So it becomes very challenging to separate how I'm feeling and how I'm communicating. That's when we see really angry emotional outbursts or outbursts out of anxiety or very fearful outbursts. We can feel fear and communicate that fear in ways that the emotion itself is not the vehicle. When we see the emotion become the vehicle, that's when our emotional outburst or communication becomes dangerous and harmful and abusive. Is this making sense? Are you all okay? Sorry, I'm just checking in. I'm like such a therapist sometimes. So emotional labor. In this industry, we see a lot of emotional labor. It's built on emotional labor. Emotional labor is when we are either adjusting our emotional presentation or using our emotions in some way to do a job. So some ways that we might see emotional labor in this industry is if you are working in the dining room and you are engaging with guests all the time. You sort of put on this face, right? Another way is if you are having to conform in some way to the culture of your organization. So you are maybe biting your tongue when you hear someone say something or do something, or you are trying to assimilate to the organization as a whole. Those are emotional laborious processes. And when we think about emotional labor, there's a bit of a spectrum, and I'm gonna call it the alignment spectrum. On one side of emotional labor, we're looking at being totally out of alignment from what we're feeling. And on the other side is when we're directly in alignment. So out of alignment would be total emotional repression, just like stuffing it down. I'm thinking about that first episode of The Bear, when he's talking in his ear and you just see him stuffing that down. That is emotional repression. But if you think about The Bear again, you see those emotions coming out in other ways. They find their way into his life, whether he's in control of them or not. The next one is called surface acting. So this is when a guest tells a really bad joke and you're I'll have the halibut for the halibut. And then you're oh, ha, and then you go in the server station, you're shut up, bro, That's surface acting. When it's a very clear mask, you can switch it on, switch it off. When we have surface acting and emotional repression, certainly, those things are tied to burnout. They're tied to being emotionally unwell, depression. That's when we see higher rates of turnover. But the next one is called deep acting. And this is when we really get into the spectrum, because on one side of deep acting, it's when you are changing your emotional life to think of rainbows and puppies and sunshine so that you feel happy when you are actually not happy. But deep acting can also be implementing compassion in your conversations with people, empathy, something that is changing and manipulating your emotional life so that it's more in line with the needs of the situation or the other of the person that you're speaking to. So on one hand, if we think of rainbows and puppies and sunshine, or think about a partner, or I'll think about my dog Barley or whatever, and that lifts my mood, that's okay. That helps. It's better than surface acting. But it still it doesn't align us completely, right? If we move more into compassion, then we are changing our emotion, but in alignment with the situation that we're in. In the research, a lot of focus is on surface acting and deep acting, like this versus that, and the preference is deep acting. But what most of the research doesn't talk about is actually feeling our emotions. What a novel thing to think about, to actually interrogate our emotions and to feel them in a moment when we're talking to a guest. If they say something that's offensive, to have a moment to be damn, that was offensive. That kind of hurt, I'm gonna feel that for a second. I'm gonna take a moment and actually feel that and then respond accordingly. So this requires emotional intelligence and coping skills. We put so much stock and stake into how can we put on this face? How can we, smile, you're on stage. Don't show any emotion unless you're crying in the walk-in or any of these things. We put a lot of energy into that when we really should be putting our energy into emotional intelligence and coping skills so that we can feel our emotions in the moment, but we have the tools and the resources to adequately cope with our emotions so that we can respond appropriately and effectively and kindly. So we need our emotions. They need to guide us, because if we don't, and then we're repressing our emotions all the time, that's when we see people ending up at the bar after work until 2 a.m. They missed their yoga class in the morning, or they haven't gone grocery shopping for a week because they are emotionally numbing because they don't know how to manage their emotions. The more emotionally intelligent and the better we are with our coping strategies, the more intensely we are able to feel without our emotions becoming the vehicle of communication. So everyone around us, ourselves included, are much safer within our organizations. But the truth is that authenticity improves our well-being. We know that when we are in alignment, we are less likely to experience burnout, we are more likely to stay at our jobs longer, and this isn't just talking about being authentic with our emotions, but authentic and in alignment with our organization's values and communicating those values and how we feel within the group, how our socio-emotional lives are functioning. Do we feel like we belong? Is our space actually inclusive? Are we careful of each other? Are we thoughtful of each other and thinking of each other and providing the same hospitality to each other that we are providing our guests? But with that, authenticity improves hospitality. Because when we have these authentic exchanges with our guests, oh my God, I just got goosebumps thinking about it. I loved sometimes being a bartender, and those moments were those connective moments with the guest or my colleagues of, gosh, I just crafted this whole experience for you, something that you'll never forget. Through my creation, I just strengthened your relationship with your partner, with your mom, with your friend, whatever. That's extraordinary. And that is the difference between hospitality and service. I can serve a drink and I can mix a mean cocktail for sure. But the hospitality is when we are able to connect authentically, which means we have to have access to our emotions. So an emotional industry is a hospitable industry. And thank you. That's me. Get in touch.
My name is Sarah Abel, and I'm an EatDenver board member, programs chair, incoming vice president. My day job, I'm a partner at Baltz & Company. Thank you all for waking up early, coming downtown, being here. Thanks to my EatDenver colleagues for creating such an energetic morning, especially the tireless Kristen Rao, my programming partner in crime, who better never stop calling me. My English teacher mother would be horrified about my double negatives, but Kristen, we love you, thank you. I am humbled and delighted to introduce our next speaker, Yannick Benjamin. He never ceases to amaze me or inspire me, and thank you for flying in from New York to join us this morning. In addition to well-deserved and hard-earned recognition from the Wall Street Journal, Bon Appetit, New York Times, Wine Spectator, just to name a few, Yannick is one of the most driven, intrepid, resilient, creative, groundbreaking, and community-minded people I've ever met. He's channeled his life-altering experiences to create authentic hospitality for guests of all abilities, whether it's offering adaptive flatware and wheelchair height seating at his fantastic East Harlem restaurant, Contento, to opening Beaupierre, a family-oriented and dog-friendly wine shop in the exact same Hell's Kitchen building where he grew up and is where his parents still live today. And if that's not enough, Yannick is also the creator of Wine on Wheels, an organization of wine lovers and somms who have come together to harness their love of great wines to benefit charity. In short, Yannick is an absolute fucking dynamo, and I learn something new every time I talk to him. So it's an honor and a privilege to introduce my friend, Yannick Benjamin.
Thank you so much. It's a real honor and pleasure to be here, and it's great to be back in Denver. It's amazing how things go full circle. I was just telling a story about maybe now 15 years ago, sometime in 07, 08, if I recall. I was injured in a car accident in 2003, and I had reached out to Bobby Stuckey, who owns Frasca Restaurant, amongst other restaurants. And I said, do you mind if I come and do like a 2-day stage? I'm in this situation, I got this car accident, and I want to get back on the floor, and I've never really done it on a wheelchair. My whole life prior to that was being a non-disabled person. And he immediately said yes, and it was the first restaurant that I actually served guests as a sommelier on my wheelchair. So Denver definitely holds a special place for my heart, and kudos to the Denver community and to the team at Frasca and Bobby Stuckey as well. What I want to talk about is virtue. And a lot of times we talk about virtue and how to live with virtue in our personal lives, but it is something that we can also do in hospitality and at work. And for myself, I learned about virtue. I went to a Catholic school for about 10 years on 51st Street and 10th Avenue, right in the heart of Hell's Kitchen. And I was taught by these crazy Christian brothers, and they talked about virtue, but it never really kind of sunk in. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I discovered Stoicism. And I'm not here to preach about a religion, but it's a discipline and it's a philosophy. And basically, Stoicism is an explanation to say that the good life is here. It's there for you. Despite any negative external forces that they may be, because there's plenty, we know that already. But Stoicism is basically living in harmony with what nature gives you. And I wish I would have known about this a long time ago, especially in 2003 when I had my car accident, because there was a period where I was feeling sorry for myself. And instead of saying to myself, well, thank you for this obstacle, thank you for this challenge, and thank you for the first 25 years of allowing me to be able to walk, but now I'm ready for this next phase. Because in life, nothing is permanent. We are all on loan. And that's what Stoicism has taught me. But it's not easy. In order to get to that point, it requires a lot of work, it requires discipline, it requires a lot of repetition, and that's what I've certainly have implemented in my life. Stoicism goes back to the ancient Greco times. Three main people when we talk about Stoicism is Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and Epictetus. And how I came upon Stoicism was through a book called Meditations. I don't know if some of you have heard of this book. It's a journal that was put together, but a journal written by Marcus Aurelius, and he wrote to himself daily. And it was basically a journal of self-improvement. And boy, when I read this book, it forever changed my life. I mean, a lot of the things that he said in there were just so obvious, but why was I not practicing it, let alone practicing it at work, in the world of hospitality, in the world of my personal life? And then I started reading other books by Massimo Pigliucci, and I just completely went into this deep dive of Stoicism, and I have never looked back. So how do I implement Stoicism as someone with a disability, as someone who is a full-time wheelchair user, as someone who is married, has a mom and dad, sister, nephews, friends, and then how do I implement it at work? Well, first off, I'll start talking about myself on a wheelchair. I try to always focus on the things that I do have. I try not to focus on the things that I don't have, and I focus on things that I can actually control. So what would that be? In New York City, unfortunately, a lot of the metro stations are not accessible, and when they are, sometimes the elevators break, and that does happen quite often. So instead of feeling sorry for myself when the elevator is broken, I say to myself, well, I'm going to get on the bus. Sure, it's going to be a longer ride, but at least now it'll give me the opportunity to call my mom and dad or call any loved ones that I haven't talked to in a little while, send some text messages, and respond to some emails. On personal relationships with my wife, with my dog, with my family members, I have learned not to make it about me. And subconsciously sometimes I realized that I was making it about me. But I realized that it's about listening, shutting my mouth, and listening to them. As Epictetus says, one mouth, two ears. I think it's a pretty good thing, to remind yourself of. Sometimes people, when they're going through difficult moments, they don't want to hear your opinion. They just want to be heard. And then the same thing with work. How do I use Stoicism to my advantage? Well, we know that there are so many things in restaurants, in hospitality, that are certainly beyond our control. Last week, we had someone who decided to break all our windows and break all our video cameras. Instead of losing our mind, sure, it was expensive and all that, what was in our control was, well, we're going to practice emotional regulation, okay? We are going to actually show empathy. Maybe this gentleman had a really bad day, clearly. Obviously, he has not been provided with the mental health resources that he needed. And so taking that approach is a lot easier, and then you realize, well, okay, it's not that bad. We still have some money that we can fix this. Luckily, we're covered by insurance as well. And so that's how just some things you can use Stoicism to your advantage. There are 4 virtues that we follow and we practice, and that's wisdom, That's courage, that's justice, temperance and moderation, which is certainly a big one in our industry. And virtue is living in harmony with the world. That's all it is. And basically, it's being the best person that you can be. And for some reason, it wasn't until a few years ago that I fully understood what virtue is. It's not about just saying it. It's not about writing it down, but it's about living it. And wisdom is to know the difference between right and wrong. And it's an accumulation of life experiences. Having the knowledge of when to get something done. And some of you might know the Serenity Prayer, right? Which is a really, again, not going back to religion, so please, but God, grant me the serenity to accept things that I cannot change, the courage to change things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I tell this to myself every day. And I don't know what God I'm really talking to, but I'm certainly talking to myself. I'm reminding myself that there are a lot of things that I cannot change, but there are certainly things that I can change. And I think it's really true, and it's an incredible statement. It's a powerful statement. And that's wisdom for part one. Justice, morality. How many of you here, including myself, have been in a situation where we felt or we were complicit, where we have seen an undocumented worker in the same place that we're working at, and they're not getting paid their full 8 hours. They're working 6 days a week. They're being berated by their supervisors. And instead of just intervening, we kind of just watch or maybe not do anything. But that's an example of justice. But in order to get to justice, you must have courage. Courage to overcome fear of speaking up. A lot of times we don't speak up in situations like that because we're afraid to get blackballed. We're afraid of the actual ramifications. But to live a life of virtue is to take your years of experience, which is wisdom, implement them, because now you're identifying that there's something wrong, which is justice, right? And then now you need the courage to actually speak up. And you are ready to deal with any ramifications from that moment on. It's executing in action. Words can only go so far, but it's the action that's really important. And then finally, temperance and moderation. Not everything has to be a shouting match. Not everything has to be calling out someone, but I still believe in diplomacy. Calling that person over. Listen, I do need to talk to you. It's been bothering me because I see person A, they're really busting their butt. They're there 12, 14 hours, and it's to my understanding that you're only paying them 8 hours a day. What's going on here? It's not fair that I'm working 5 days a week. I get paid my 8 hours, and I'm being treated with dignity and respect, but I see that there's something wrong there. That's a good form of temperance. But then the other side of temperance and moderation is we're surrounded by alcohol, there's a lot of partying, finding that right balance, that right equilibrium. It's about what to do, how to say it, what to avoid, and what things not to do at all. And that's temperance and moderation at its best. Before I finish, I finally took Stoicism to another level I'd say about a year and a half ago. It's just about the same time I had opened the restaurant Contento up in East Harlem. And despite that I was doing a daily journal and I was writing and I was doing my own self-evaluation, and I thought I was doing everything right, there was a woman, along with her colleague, they came to eat at Contento restaurant, table 16. They're having their meal, and unfortunately, the server was pouring ice water, and somehow he managed to pour ice water on her back. Now, you can imagine when you're not expecting that, it's quite shocking, it's not a very pleasant feeling, and she was quite upset. Luckily, it was just ice water. I saw the whole thing from just sitting by the host stand. I immediately went up to her and I said, I'm really sorry, I apologize, we'll make this up to you. I'm smiling, I'm doing everything right, I think, at that time. And she was infuriated, and she could not stop saying, well, now it looks like I peed on my dress. Now it looks like I peed on my dress. And talk about breaking away from the virtues of what I've been practicing up to that point. I immediately responded, after the third or fourth time she had said that, well, at least you have full control of your bladder. Well, it triggered me when she said that, because as someone who's spinal cord injured, I'm paralyzed from just below the chest. I don't have control of my bladder. So when she said that, but I made it about me. Instead, what I should have done was, well, maybe she's having a bad day. Maybe she just found out that a loved one just passed away. Maybe she got fired. Maybe she lost money in the stock market. But I made it about me at that moment. So I needed to do self-evaluation. I needed to take accountability. And unlike this quote that I always read to myself by Seneca, I am aiming to live each day as it is a complete lifetime. Well, I wasn't doing it at that moment. And so I knew that I needed to write down things, and I needed to repeat, and make sure that I really became even more disciplined, because discipline now is freedom later. Always to live in agreement with nature. When you wake up, tell yourself that this is a gift. And when something goes wrong, tell yourself that this is a gift. So I had to repeat to that. No matter what, I knew that I was going out into the world and that there were going to be some obstacles. And when an obstacle came my way, just like that situation on table 16, I was going to be thankful for it, and I was going to welcome it with open arms. And what I do now is I practice premeditation of adversity. That's something that we do amongst Stoics. Premeditation of adversity is something that's really helped me, especially, and I urge you all who work in this crazy industry, wake up in the morning, give yourself some time, and just envision some of the craziest things that are going to happen in the restaurant. You know you're going to take an order, and when you put it in, the chef's going to come out and say, sorry, we're 86. Kind of infuriating, right? It happens. POS system goes down. The pipe breaks. People call out sick. There's a COVID breakout. You've put all that. Already you're starting to practice, and you're starting to find solutions to these problems. So then you're really prepared. That's premeditation of adversity, and it's something that we can all practice for all of us that are in this industry. And Marcus Aurelius, and I'm going to just paraphrase because I know I'm running out of time, so I apologize. He basically says in one of his journals, and I practice this myself, when you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be ungrateful, they will be arrogant, they will be dishonest, they will be jealous, they will be surly. And they are like this because they cannot tell the difference between good and bad. But I will not be angry, because we all have to work together, and to obstruct each other is unnatural. What he's basically saying is that we've all been on the other side. So we have no business judging, but we do have the business of finding empathy and really distilling it. Another thing that I practice before I go to work, being aware of my facial expressions. I know that if I kind of come in there like this, it's going to affect the staff, it's going to affect the ambiance of the actual restaurant and the wine store. Body language. Someone drops a plate, even though you think you're smiling, but you might do something as little as, or no one responds well to that kind of stuff. And tone. You might have one of your employees the day before, you just did a whole little seminar, and they ask you, I forgot, can you tell me what the grape on that wine is? And you respond back, but I just did that yesterday. Instead, just tell them what the grape is. Finally, a couple of my mantras. Stay calm, breathe, and keep pushing forward. Control what you can control. Focus on what you have. And something that I repeat to myself as much as I can, take the pause, take the delay. Not everyone needs to know your opinion. Not everyone needs to know your pure judgments. So the pause and delay is very helpful in situations where you find yourself where you're ready to explode. Just take the time, a few moments, and process it. Is it actually worth it? Stop complaining. Really. I think in this world we do a lot of complaining. I know I complain a lot, and honestly, it does no one good, and it certainly doesn't do you any good. I was ready. I woke up this morning. I had my dry cleaners all ready, and I found the stain, and come on, this is crazy. I'm going to let a little stain on my pants, move on, make things happen. And finally, stillness and silence is your best friend. We're in an industry where there's a lot of stimulation, grabbing you by the elbow, come here, come there, phone calls, text messages. And I want to leave you with this quote because I read it every single day. And every time I read it, I swear I get so emotional. And I actually have it on the front of the wine list, so customers can read it, but I don't know how many actually do. But it's actually from a movie called The Sound of Steel. And it goes like this. The world does keep moving, and it can be a damn cruel place. But for me, those moments of stillness, that place, that's the kingdom of God. And that place will never abandon you. So it's those moments of stillness, taking time for yourself, where you will find those answers. Anyway, thank you very much.
My name is John Schlegel, and my story is that it was September 11th, it was 2001, and our world completely changed. That morning I woke up, and our country was under attack. We had lives that were lost unnecessarily, travel seized immediately in one moment. Fear, anxiety completely consumed the entire country. And I got a call from my boss that day. I think my pager went off, and it was Yasu-san. And he said, we need to have an all-manager meeting. We need you to come in immediately. And so I'll never forget, at 11 o'clock on September 11th, I walked in and saw Takuma-san, Koji-san, Toshi, and Yasu. And we sat at a table, and they all looked at me as the only American and said, are you okay? I'll never forget that moment. Can you imagine, you guys, the entire world overnight being seized from something completely out of your control? I think we probably all can. I think that the events of COVID and 9/11, while very, very different, have incredible parallels. I think the anxiety, the nervousness that consumed a lot of us is undeniable. Those events, completely unforgettable. And yet, to dwell on it, for me, is a fool's journey. Today, right now, what we get to do is celebrate. We're in a moment together of being part of something so much bigger than us. We get to value the most important thing in our life, which is time. And together, we get to share with our peers the thing that we love the most, our passion, which is experiences. It is an honor and it is a privilege to introduce one of my greatest teachers and mentors of my life, Yasu-san, who's here to talk to us about creating experiences in his speech called The Matchmaker.
Hi, good morning. I have 10 minutes. So, anyway, we work late and we stay up late. So, I was writing what to talk about today late at night, actually around 1 or 2. So, I was half asleep, so I forgot about what I wrote. So I brought my script. So I'm going to read it, if you don't mind. Yeah. Anyway, first of all, John, thank you so much for the introduction. I and John, we have known each other for the longest time. After he started work for us at Sushi, many years ago, he talked about his dreams. I clearly recall what he said. John, do you remember that? What he said was he wanted to open up his own place. And I understood immediately what he was talking about, because same thing happened to us too. When you are, I'm older, a lot older now, but when you are young and, stupid, you don't think about too much, right? Because your passion grabs you. So you feel you need to do whatever you want to do. So maybe some people may say that's a little bit naive, but in order to jump into something that would change your entire life, you have to be a little bit stupid. And otherwise, you worry about too many things. And I think there are a lot of restaurant owners or managers. I think your passion grabbed you to move into this industry. Passion must take over everything, including stupidity, right? So here we are. After many years of journey, including recent pandemic, we are still standing here. In my case, our journey began when we were very young, 5 or 6 years old. Over the years, we have been asked why we chose our profession. Simple answer was, or is, our mother couldn't cook well. So we had no choice but to cook for ourselves. Plus, she and my father worked in the field at a farm in southern Japan until very late at night. So even when we were little boys, my brothers and I cooked for ourselves. We had no choice. So by the time we were teenagers, we could cook quite well. At least we knew what we had to do to cook and so on. So when I think of this, I thank my mother for being a lousy cook. Yeah. Now, by the time we started to cook professionally, it's been 49 years gone. Meanwhile, I left my home in Japan to live in London for 10 years. When I worked in a Japanese restaurant there, I am now 69, and the journey still continues. When I think about all these years, what changed me most was the realization of the power of the food we create. One night, many years ago, when I was making sushi for one of the regular guests at the sushi bar, by seeing him fully immersed in the experience of the sushi I created, something unexpected that happened to me. This something changed me. How I approach the food. So it was like waking up after many years of sleep. I felt finally I was awake. What I realized was one piece of sushi can create such a tremendous sensation, impact with a guest. It can touch people's core being. One piece of sushi can create one's energy, emotion, feeling, thoughts, etc. One piece of sushi can become part of ourselves, our eyesight, skin or hair, and so on. Not only nourishing the body, but also give a mental and emotional experience that impact to the guest. This was a powerful realization for me, and I was finally awake. Since then, it brings me so much joy making sushi every day. So what I do nowadays at the restaurant is to focus on chef's table. In Japanese, we call it omakase. It means leave it to the chef you trust. There are many chefs in this group here. I'm sure you also get involved with your own chef's table. As a chef, when we are asked to create something for the guest, something happens to us. It is a challenge that excites us. However, when I was younger, and when I was asked to do omakase, my pride took over me, and not considering the guest who receive our creations. Also, since sushi is a rather expensive food, we really need to meet our guests' higher expectations in order to overcome the deficit. So this realization changed me in how I approach chef's table. I began to curate the menu toward their desires. Specifically speaking, whenever the request for the chef's table comes in, I ask guests many questions in advance about their likes and dislikes. This is to understand guest needs. So I need to know their flavor profile, how hungry they are, all that. Instead of just creating what I think is the best, I now involve guests in creating menu. So I need to know who the guests are. Last year I had 2,300 guests. I made over 900 menus based on each guest requirement. By the way, as you may know, our youngest brother is at the fish market in southern Japan. So I also need to get him involved in creating the dishes. I basically talked to him, this customer wanting to have certain type of fish. So I asked him to find one. So it is like making a match of what guests are expecting and what fish and ingredients are available. So whenever guests get seated in front of me, I tell them, I'm not a chef. I have never been a chef. Instead, I have been known as a quite good matchmaker. By hearing this, guests have a strange reaction, strange face, hearing that I may not be the chef creating their menu and that I am the matchmaker instead. They often do not know how to respond to me, so what I tell them is that I am introducing them to these fish tonight, and they do not know which fish they are meeting tonight. And I also tell them fish have no idea who they are about to meet. So I am, it's like setting up a blind date between guest and the fish. And what's great about the blind date is I tell them they can get to take their blind date home tonight. Yeah. So I also explained to them what kind of menu I created for them. So I go through all the menus and explanation of the food, especially tuna. I explain all the different type of tuna. And so when they are actually eating it, they understand which part I am using to create a dish. Lastly, after the dinner, I get home and send a thank you email to the guest. I always do by midnight. This email has tons of interesting tidbits with YouTube videos, including my first fish market visit in southern Japan, wasabi farm in Japan, the island all the fish came from, and the 600 pounds of bluefin tuna auction, etc. Once again, I wanted to have chef's table to be not just eating food. However, it is more like having a deeper experience that guests are deeply involved in. I'm 69 years old, and let's see how far I can go. Thank you.
A lot of emotional talk this morning. Now we're going to talk about technology. A little bit of a switch. So my name is Adam Schlegel. I have the honor to introduce Bill Long. Because it rarely ever happens as CFOs, I'm going to introduce Bill as a fucking dynamo CFO. Rarely happens for CFOs. Bill is the president and CFO for Snooze. He's had a long, pretty storied history in our industry.
Coming from the Outback Steakhouse, that well-known Australian food establishment. Worked at Noodles Company, and then when we were young into our Snooze career, we managed to somehow acquire and bring Bill into our Snooze orbit. He is probably the most highly recruited person in this room, so we're super fortunate to have him continue to drive Snooze and do it all it is. Very active in our community, working with Cooking Matters, working as a precious child. He spends a lot of time with his family, very avid outdoorsman. Actually, the only person I've ever seen hit a hole-in-one at Peter Newland's golf tournament. He is, and I would say, one of the major reasons why Snooze continues to develop and grow. He is a CFO that has really embraced the concept of people, planet, and profit. And I'm excited to introduce my friend Bill here, who's going to usher us into the next world of technology in our industry. So, Bill.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Adam. What an inspirational morning. Sorry we have to talk about technology now. I feel a little silly moving from this morning to Homer Simpson, but this was the best thing I could think of in starting a conversation about technology, because I really do think we've all felt like this at some point in our lives, maybe even this morning, right? But the reality is that technology is all around us in our industry. It's really driving and guiding a lot of what we do on a day-to-day basis. And when technology is at its best, it really does allow us to operate more efficiently and to create better experiences for our guests and for our employees. So there was a survey last year of small and independent restaurant operators, which is where all the data is going to come from that you see here today. But 75% of small and independent operators say they're going to adopt new technology in the next 12 months. 71% of them say they're going to be spending more on technology in the next 12 months. I really hope none of you are in the 4% that are adopting new technology and thinking you're not going to spend more, because that's not a possibility. So if you're part of the 4%, we can talk later. One thing that we don't lack in our industry is choice, and choice in partners. This is a restaurant technology map that you absolutely cannot read, and that is on purpose. This is from 2001. There are over 231 different companies represented on this map across 16 different verticals, right? I know of several companies that aren't on this map. Let's just go ahead and say there's 250 different companies that represent our industry across these 16 different verticals to try to help us solve the problems that we have before us. One of the hardest things in dealing with a landscape that is this fragmented is figuring out where to start and how to navigate it. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. I really like to use logic and decision making around how we do this. And so we're going to talk about these three things. And if there's one thing you take away from the talk today, it is this: stay informed, have a point of view on the technology, and prioritize. So when we talk about staying informed, I think everyone in this room would say, look, I'm a restaurateur. I don't need to know everything there is about technology. My competitive advantage lies in the food, the service, the ambiance, the experience that I provide, right? No one has ever said, I just went to this amazing new restaurant. You should see the kitchen display system that they're using, right? That just doesn't happen. That's not where your competitive advantage lies. But the reality is we're more than restaurant operators. We are all business operators too. And we operate in one of the most competitive industries that exists in the landscape today. We live and die on razor-thin margins, and great profits are hard to come by even in the best of times. So what can technology do for us? Things like wanting to serve bigger portions to create more value, right? You may not have the money to do that, but you can use technology to manage your waste better and put those savings back into portion size on your plate. Want to buy higher quality ingredients but can't afford them, right? We can use technology to put in inventory systems to create better PARs and find ways to create savings in our ordering processes. If we want to pay our employees more per hour but can't find it in the budget, we can implement scheduling systems that have dynamic demand forecasting and schedule adherence where we can actually create savings for ourselves and put that back into the hourly wage rate of our employees. So these are just some examples of ways that technology can make us better. When we look at independent and small operators, 80% of us are using a traditional point of sale. When you roll in cloud-based point of sale systems, this goes up to closer to 90%. What's really amazing, though, is that the drop-off from a point of sale technology to the next most used technology is really only 1 in 4 operators using accounting platforms, loyalty platforms, first-party online ordering. So technology, while readily available, is not widely adopted across our industry, particularly in the independent space. But that doesn't mean that we can turn a blind eye to it. And I think in staying informed, we have to know what's going on in the landscape today. I'm going to give you just a couple examples here of things that you may say, absolutely not, never touching that, doesn't fit for me. But I think we all owe it to ourselves to be informed about what these things are and why they're important. Virtual brands. So I'm sure all of you have been aware of these and possibly even approached by them to put them into your restaurants. There are casual dining operators right now that are doing $1 million of revenue annually in virtual brands outside of their core brand today. Again, not saying it's for everyone, but this is a marketplace that's moving incredibly fast, and I don't know anyone that wouldn't want to evaluate whether or not adding $1 million of potential revenue into their operations is something that makes sense for them. Robotics is really coming along. Again, getting served your food and beverage by a robot seems a little out there, but it's happening. Where it's really starting to take off, though, is in the back of house. So there are a ton of technologies that are evolving very rapidly in and around how we actually produce food, prepare food. There are restaurants like Sushi and Spice out of Boston that have done some really cool things with conveyor belt sushi, where this is actually creating an experience around what is an old robotics technology, whereas Spice is using these cook bowls to actually prepare, cook, and serve food all out of this one robotic bowl. Dynamic pricing is also something that's recently come into play. So I don't know if you're aware of this, but you could, if you chose this weekend, to raise your prices during times of peak demand. There are fast casual operators that are now putting in digital menu boards and dynamically changing their price based on time of day and day of week. There are a lot of industries that already do this, right? The airline industry does this, the hotel industry does this, Amazon does this. And if you think about it, the restaurant industry actually has always done this in a way. We just do it through discounting when we actually need to drive traffic. That is a form of dynamic pricing. But one of the things our industry has not really adopted is the ability to raise prices when demand is really high. So again, not saying that these are any things that any of you would want to adopt or need to adopt, but I think it's really important for us as business operators to be informed of what's actually happening in the landscape around us so that we can evaluate it. Which brings us to our next point, which is having a point of view. You owe it to yourself to know what's happening in the landscape and then have a point of view on whether or not it works within your restaurant, within the experience that you're trying to provide. When there are 250 different technology operators out there trying to sell business into you, they are all going to have a point of view on why their technology is necessary, why it works the best, and it's up to you to be able to see through whether or not it works within your restaurant. So, case in point, QR codes, right? These are things that really were very low adopted prior to the pandemic. During the pandemic, when we were all worried about contact, social distancing, QR menu, QR pay became rapidly adopted. Most of you probably have experimented with this and may still have these in place in your restaurant today. But I'll direct you to the box in the middle here. This is from a business that sells QR menu and QR pay, noting that 58% of consumers would like the option to use a QR code, 70% say they have a positive experience with them, and can reduce labor costs by up to 150%, which I actually don't think is mathematically accurate, but I don't think you can reduce it by more than 100. But if you look at Greg Levin, the CEO of BJ's, he recently noted in an earnings call that when they went back to physical menus, they saw a 70-cent increase in their check average, moving away from QR codes, right? Another operator at FS Tech last summer noting that there were certain QR codes were going to be here forever, but as soon as guests started returning to the restaurants, the first thing they wanted was a real menu in their hands, right? So these technologies exist and they work great in certain circumstances. You have to have a point of view as to whether or not these are going to work well within your operation. A couple other examples of this, digital ordering. I actually don't know that having 9 iPads set up behind the host stand works for anybody. There are technologies that can solve this, so if you're living in this world, I'm happy to help you navigate towards a better situation. But the way that you do this is, again, going to be dependent on the point of view that you have relative to the experience that you're trying to create within your operation. And digital waitlist is another really good example of something where you can still use a paper waitlist. This is totally fine, right? You can create energy. You can serve drinks to people who are waiting. But maybe that's not the experience that you want to create for your guests. And then finally, you're going to have to prioritize. That sounds obvious. It seems simple, but this is actually the hardest thing to do out of the 3 of these. This is the thing that I've seen my own businesses struggle with the most. You want to do absolutely everything, right? There are dozens of problems to solve, and let's face it, everyone in this room skews towards being a problem solver. You see an issue, you want to fix it, you want to fix it tomorrow. Technology is complex. It's hard to implement. It doesn't always go the way that you think it's going to go. And it does take time for technologies to be adopted by your employees, but also in some instances by your guests, depending on what type of technology it is you're implementing. So you have to be able to prioritize where you're going to put your focuses. Whether or not you think that the largest challenge that you're facing in the upcoming year is increased food costs and supply shortages, or high labor cost and retention, the solution to those problems are going to be different. And there are lots of different types of solutions that exist within the marketplace, but you have to choose where you think your competitive advantage lies and how you're going to enhance that competitive advantage, or where you think your biggest profit opportunity is and how you're going to enhance your profit through leveraging one of these technologies to create the solution for that. And so I'll leave you with this today. There are a lot of companies up on this map, okay? Trust me, none of them are perfect. None of them are going to solve the exact problem you want solved in the exact way that you want it solved. And you're going to spend an awful lot of time either searching for the right solution or working with a partner to solve the problem exactly the way you think it needs to be solved. That is not always the best path forward. Sometimes you need to make sure that you're not letting great be the enemy of really good, because there are a lot of companies on here that have really good solutions. You need to leverage your network to talk to people who are using these companies, have experience with them, and can give you feedback around what works and what doesn't work. And ultimately, you're going to have to make decisions based on what problem you're trying to solve and what compromises you can live with, because nearly every one of these decisions is going to be a compromise in some respect, but you're still going to be able to make meaningful progress on solving some of the biggest issues that you have in your business if you find the right partner. So with that, thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Taylor Baroni, and I am the Colorado State Sales Representative for Tito's Handmade Vodka. I'm excited to announce our next speaker, Kourtny Garrett. She's the president and CEO of Downtown Denver Partnership. Kourtny served as the president and CEO of Downtown Dallas Incorporated for 7 years and was selected to lead the Downtown Denver Partnership in January of 2022. In addition to contributing to the revitalization of downtown Dallas, one of her most proud achievements was a decade-long process to create downtown Dallas's first public elementary school with Dallas Independent School District. With nearly 25 years of experience in the development of livable communities, Kourtny is fueled by passion for cities. Her expertise is rooted in building social, cultural, and economic vibrancy, creating places for people that provide access and opportunity for all. The mantra of her life and her work follows the great Jane Jacobs. Cities have the capability of providing something for everybody only because and only when they are created by everybody. Please join me in welcoming Kourtny Garrett for her speech, The Future of Downtown Denver.
So thank you for the little technology break there. That's helped to transition and pivot us a little bit here with our topic. So I'm absolutely thrilled. As I was just introduced, I've been here in Denver for a year. I was born here, so I do get to wear that locals badge. Born at St. Joe's proud, moved to Dallas when I was 10. Long story short, now I'm back, and I'm one of those boomerangers, and it's absolutely incredible. And while I will talk a lot about the challenges that face us today, there is a reason why I left a 25-year career in a growing market like Dallas, Texas, to come here to Denver. So really excited to talk about all of the things that are in line, which I know so many of you, regardless of where your business is in the city or the region, is really important that we have a strong downtown, because we all know that downtowns in the entire nation are the heartbeats of our city, right? They're the place where we come together, where we make memories, where we celebrate big occasions. Downtown continues to be our economic engine for Denver. We've got some specific stats here. 27% of overall jobs are in the downtown core. That's 37% also of total wages. 52% of the region's total office inventory is in the core of downtown. And then when we draw that circle a little bit bigger and we talk about the city center, like Lohi, where I live, Rhino, which this is a map from the 2007 Downtown Denver Area Plan, a little outdated that we're not even acknowledging 5 Points and Rhino in that area, right? So we know that these neighborhoods are living and breathing areas. So really important that we think about when we zoom out, city center represents 12% of the overall sales tax for our entire region. It's really, really critical that downtown is healthy and succeeds. We continue to perform in a really great way on a national level. We're the 6th fastest growing city in the US economy, 6th best large city to do business, 10th in tech talent in North America. So sometimes, I say often that when we're here and we're local and we're living and we're breathing it every day, our nose is so close to the glass that all we can see is the dust. So sometimes we have to step back and take a look at where Denver is nationally, particularly in this, whatever we're gonna call post-pandemic environment, where we are seeing all of the trend lines moving in the right direction. Now, that being said, I am also a realist. I've been in the downtown management industry for over 25 years. All of our cities are facing tremendous challenge, so it's all gonna be what we do about it. One of our greatest challenges right now, commercial office vacancy. It's everywhere in the headlines. 2019 overall in the Central Business District, we were at 14.1% vacancy, one of the top performing markets in the nation. Today, 27.3%. Now nationally, national office vacancy in downtowns is at 28.6%. So slightly better than national. Still relatively healthy, but not what Denver's used to, because we've enjoyed 10 years of the market winds being at our back pre-pandemic. We're also still trying to get that weekday return. You all are living and breathing this every day. 54% of our daytime office traffic is back. What that means in downtown Denver is in a matter of one day. In a lot of cities, it was March 13th when there was a regulated shutdown. We lost 130,000 people from our downtown core. We're only back to about having half of that. Now, that being said, let's look at the glass half full. 42% national average weekday return. So we're performing better than national.
Now, some bright spots are right here in your industry. And please do not get me wrong that I don't acknowledge that the restaurant, retail, and hospitality industries were the hardest hit in the pandemic. What we are seeing here locally is that we're one of the fastest to recover industries. Denver restaurant dining, according to our stats with OpenTable, which is where we track, overall Denver restaurant reservations are 8% above pre-pandemic levels. When we look at the National Retail Vitality Index and the National Hospitality Vitality Index, you can see still lagging pre-pandemic numbers in a really big way. So again, glass half full, the tremendous market potential that we have here in Denver. 16th Street Mall, that's that colorful line right there in the middle. We're seeing headlines right and left. And many of us, my office is right there on 16th, right at 16th and Arapahoe. Some days are good, some days are not so good. What is not true is the everyday headline that 16th Street businesses are dying. So many of you are sitting there right now. And I know some days are hard, but there's a lot of momentum. 147 ground floor businesses in total on 16th, 40 of those are local, and we have 40 vacancies. I say opportunities, right? So we see some new openings coming already. Little Finch, Rush Bowl, Sophia's Pizzeria, and then we have a laundry list of new businesses that are under construction and in permitting right now. These, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, will open in the next 30 days. Really exciting to see that movement. I'm sure you've read, and some of you have been a part of our Pop-Up Denver program. So we started with round 1 with some great funds from the city and county of Denver. We're helping new businesses come into the market. We've learned a lot from the Pop-Up round 1. We're starting Pop-Up round 2. We're gonna have some additional, probably 10 businesses coming through that. 2 collectives. One is a retail collective, the other is a restaurant collective that's nurturing refugee businesses in one space. A lot of help from Wells Fargo and JP Morgan to get those 2 projects off the ground. So new and innovative ways of looking at things. Retail and hospitality, right here, I just want to look at our convention numbers. 2022, 280,000 visitors generated $604 million of economic impact in downtown. That was last year. This year, we're on track. 969 convention center events are projected to bring almost 400,000 people to downtown. So again, we think about trend lines, right? We are used to a market that's been blowing it out of the water. Right now, we're looking at where we're moving ahead, where that trend line is moving up. Really positive. Another important stat that we track, hotel occupancy. In 2019, average hotel occupancy in downtown Denver was 85%. Right now, we're back up to 78%, moving in the right direction, not that far apart. From our employment base, think about those daytime restaurant goers, right? So we're projected, 2027, over 150,000 people to work in downtown Denver, or 150,000 jobs. That doesn't mean, don't get me wrong, they're not gonna be back 5 days a week. We need to pivot our businesses, right, to think about that. But 150,000 FTEs projected in 2027. We're at 138,000 today. And what you can see here, I think this is pretty interesting, we hit a peak of downtown employment right in early 2020. And then you see very specifically where that dropped off in the pandemic, and now we're coming back up. We're still the 6th largest, fastest growing labor market here in Denver. Now, full candor, we were at number 4 pre-pandemic, so we have seen a little bit of slippage, and I could talk about why I think that's happening. A lot of it has to do with affordability, but still in the top 10 market where labor and talent is moving. And we see that in our residential numbers. Downtown Denver has doubled its residential population since 2010, and we're continuing to see that growth. Draw, again, the bigger circle, 100,000 people living. And when you look at neighborhoods like Golden Triangle, that's projected with the number of projects that are under construction today, so we can count on those people leaving because demand for living in downtown certainly has not waned. 10,000 more people by the end of 2024 in Golden Triangle alone. So a lot of growth in that residential space. Again, as we think about our business models, all of a sudden we need to start thinking about where people are working, where people are living, and how they're spending their time. We're still seeing a tremendous amount of investment, $2 billion of projects under construction in downtown today. Some of these great examples, Ball Arena, River Mile, 5280 Trail, Skyline Park. These are huge investments into the core of our city, particularly with these two projects, Ball Arena, River Mile, the entire stadium district, as well as the additional housing around the Auraria campus. I'm pointing over here because I'm usually on that side. Right here, more than 50,000 more people potential to live in the downtown area. Huge for downtown. 16th Street Mall, let's talk about 16th Street Mall for just a minute. I believe this is one of our most pivotal projects for downtown Denver. We have a beautiful public realm improvement plan. You're going to see some transit improvements. You're going to have more space for businesses to have outdoor cafes, all incredibly important to our environment. It is also an opportunity to completely reposition the core and the heart of our city. With market disruption comes huge opportunity. And that's where I want our organization to sit, is being those change makers and seeing that what has happened with the dip in the market, tank of the market in some cases, comes this blank canvas where we can rebuild and we can recreate and we can redefine what Denver is known for. Reimagining Spear Boulevard is one of those great examples. When we think about the division that Spear has created in our downtown and our urban core and how we're divided from the 40,000 students that are here on the AHEC campus, downtown Denver is a college town. Little known secret, right? But we're not connected. And we can be when we rethink about how our city is planned. I want to touch on public safety for just a minute because I think that it would be obviously incredibly tone deaf not to. So coming in, we know every city in the country is experiencing some of the most acute public health and public safety crises in our lifetime. So what do we do about it? We're not just going to sit on our hands and say every city's experiencing this, so what can we do? As an organization, the partnership sits in a really interesting spot. We are not law enforcement and we're not policymakers, but we are conveners and we are influencers. So we've brought together a multitude of agencies to work together in a very specific deployment strategy where we have police, we have outreach workers, we have mental health experts, substance abuse navigators, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Colorado, our Attorney General, all of these entities working together, again, in a very specific way. Some of it's happening at the state level when it comes to policy, and some of it's happening literally right outside the convention center where we're seeing some of our most vulnerable statistics in terms of where we are having challenges in our city. So I really encourage you, as one little plug, downtowndenver.com/safety has a lot of information on this, and we're bringing the community together to get involved as well. You can see some of we launched this at right before Thanksgiving, so you can see some of the progress that we've made just in a short amount of time. And here's how you can get involved. We have a few sessions. We just had one last week. We have another one on April 26th. And this really, again, with all of the different law enforcement and social service providers, we're having open conversations with the community about the progress, about what you're seeing, what you're experiencing as business owners, so that we can continue to react, we continue to be proactive, and continue to really be bold in how we move our city forward. So my little timer here just told me that I am done. We have a lot of great momentum moving forward in terms of what we're calling our bold moves. I've talked about a lot of it today. But I do encourage you, if you're not involved with the Downtown Denver Partnership, this is an opportunity to get involved. We're a private nonprofit organization, and we are working and have for the last 70 years in the best interest of downtown Denver. And I'm just so grateful to be sitting in the shoes that I am today here with all of you. So thank you very much.
That concludes this morning's programming. If you missed it, in our member newsletter, signups for the Big Eat are open. That's going to be July 20th. And then Harvest Week, save the date, will be October 2nd through 5th. Have a great rest of your morning, and thanks so much for joining us.